This is netstack.fm, your weekly podcast about networking, Rust, and everything in between. You are listening to episode 6, recorded on the 9th of September 2025, where Glenn has a conversation with Daniel Stenberg, creator and maintainer of Curl, one of the most widely used networking tools on the internet.
So welcome everybody, it's another week for netstack.fm. Today with me is Daniel Stenberg. He's the creator and maintainer of Curl. It is one of the most widely used networking tools on the internet. So welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, very nice to hear you. So today we want to explore a bit with you your journey through decades of protocol work, as well as the story of Curl. I know you have like an amazing blog and other resources where you explain a lot of this already, so sadly we won't be able to go as deep in the weeds as you do in your blog post through all these years, but I do want to at least scratch the surface for some of the people that might not know you yet. So could you maybe quickly introduce a bit like how you got started into like programming and networking, etc.?
Oh, yes. Well, it's a kind of a long story. And yeah, okay, so start out here. So I'm Swedish, so I'm based in Stockholm, and I started everything, or my journey into computers started in the mid 80s actually, where I got my Commodore 64. I actually found friends who had a Commodore 64 and got into that, and then eventually bought my own together with my little brother in 1985. And then that was sort of kickstarted my interest in computers, programming, and everything. I got hooked, and I'm still sort of fascinated by it. I still enjoy it, so that sort of changed my life in some ways. So as a teenager, then I started programming, and I've been programming ever since. In the early 1990s or mid 1990s, I actually changed jobs, and I got into a programming work where we had direct internet access. I learned about IRC and started to use internet directly, Gopher and Archie in those days, and then of course the web as it started to grow. And while working, when I discovered IRC, really, that's how I got into network programming, because I started to work on an IRC bot together with a friend. That was really my first steps into TCP programming, client programming, open source in C, and everything. I have sort of course, grown into that, but that's how I got into programming networky stuff, really. And it was fascinating, and I enjoyed it pretty much from the beginning. It was fun to make it sort of, the networking part of it all.
Okay, and so you mentioned there TCP, because I've used IRC a lot as well in my early days, but I never programmed a bot. So was it like some kind of protocol on top of TCP that you had to use?
Oh yeah, so IRC is a protocol. It's an RFC. I think it's 1459 or something. So it's an old RFC from the, I think, early 1990s or something. And it pretty much describes how to talk to a IRC server. So yes, but of course, when I started that, I didn't really know about what's a protocol and how do you do this. How hard can it be? I want to do this, and then I pretty much learned along the way, figured out about the IRC, checked other source codes for other clients and other bots. How do they do it? And so yeah, it was a learning curve really into all of that, how to do TCP programming, how to speak protocols, how does it actually work. And IRC, as many protocols, the RFC, it describes a protocol, but only so far. The rest of the world has moved on a little bit since the RFC, so most of the clients actually didn't follow it completely, and there were huge chunks of the IRC client things that weren't covered by the RFC, so there was totally outside of it. So it was a good lesson in how network programming, and different clients, different implementations sort of still cooperate online.
Yeah, and I guess that's still a bit true today, where there might be specifications, but they are written after the facts, or like some are like a bit ambiguous, and the clients can choose how to use it.
Absolutely. And as always, because a spec is language primarily, right? Or someone's vision of how things should work, and then reality sets in and things change and time passes and everything. So over time, maybe everything in the spec is not exactly the way, implementations need to do or something. So over time, we deviate a little bit, and people interpret the language in the spec different ways. So yeah, it is certainly exactly that way still. And nowadays in real life, of course, over time we try to make up for that. Hey, we make a new draft of the spec. We make a new version to accommodate everyone's new understandings and ideas how it actually. And since I've been working with HTTP so much, that's certainly how the HTTP protocol has evolved over time. That every every decade or so, we have to refresh it, because then we have gathered a lot of new experiences, more people and more implementations, and the wording we did back then, maybe it's not as clear, maybe it was a little bit wrong, and now we clarify and write it again and elaborate a little bit more to make sure that future implementers get a better understanding for how things should be.
Yeah, yeah, correct. Even though I have a feeling that those specifications, so there are a lot of them, a lot of RFCs, and I feel a lot of them, even though they are widely used standards, are never really going into like the status of the specifications. A lot of them are like standard or draft, but not like, I feel a lot of them are stuck in draft while not being like accepted, even though they are being used.
Yes, there's it's a wide range of how standard and how experimental they are. So there's certainly the entire spectrum of different specs. A lot of specs have been written that were never implemented, right? Or they were sort of failed specs and shouldn't probably never have even been published, because no one really cares about them. So there's certainly, and then we have the other end of the specs that we all implement them and we follow them and we try to make sure that everyone else does too. So there's RFCs as a concept is certainly a wide set of different specs, really, in that regard.
And so if we go back to earlier in our conversation, you were telling where you came from, and we also know now where curl is, but I want to know, how did it get started? And I suppose it's hard to imagine that you had the vision of what it is now, that it would become that, right? So my question is, like, what did you initially want to do with curl, and why did you build it?
Yeah, exactly. As you say, it's when you look at what it is today, it's easy to think that we had some kind of vision that led to this point in time, but it certainly was not like that. So it just started as a little toy because as I was working on that IRC bot that I was mentioning, it was called Dancer, by the way, the software project, and it was open source. We had contributors, we made it online, of course, and sort of helped out as an early open source project. And while working on that IRC bot, I figured that, well, hey, we should add a currency translation service to the bot. So you could ask the bot, hey, how much is $100 in Swedish currency today? How hard can that be? We just need to download the currency rates every now and then and I found some sites that I could download currency rates from. But okay, how do you download currency rates? Yeah, you just need a little tool to download HTTP. So that's how I started, and I found a little tool called HTTP GET in late 1996 that I started this journey with. That was basically 100 lines of code. It wasn't written by me then, but I found, and it was also before Google, by the way, so I couldn't Google for it. It was written by a Brazilian developer, Rafael, and it worked almost the way I wanted it to. So I patched it, and I sent him some patches, and he quite soon got bored by my patches, because I think he was, he just made it, published it online. I don't think he wanted to maintain it or work on it anymore anyway. So he basically told me to, take over and do whatever you want with this. And I did. So I became the maintainer of that HTTP GET project pretty quickly. And then it went on from there. So we started to download HTTP. I found a site on Gopher, added Gopher support. I added FTP support, and I added upload support for FTP. So I changed the name once because it wasn't only HTTP anymore. And then I changed it again because it wasn't only GET anymore. So I changed the name twice. And the second time I changed it to curl in March 1998. C for client, and the URL for URL then, because it would specify the other endpoint as a URL.
That means all the protocols you support are like supporting URLs in one way or another?
Yes, exactly. So that has been a little bit what I try to, and one of the ways in an open source project, of course, and in any software project, it's easy to get a creeping featureism that you just add and add and add stuff. So it is somewhat important to know exactly what is in the project and what is not in the project, where to draw the line in the sand, and how to say, if someone says, hey, we should add this feature, is it in or is it out, right? And I think sometimes saying no is something more important than saying yes, so that we make sure that we stick true to some kind of core idea. What is curl really, and what isn't it? So yeah, one of the core things is then that you should be able to specify the endpoint with a URL. So there should be a URL syntax standard for the endpoint. And in some cases, we're maybe not staying true to that requirement, but we try to. And also, another thing is that curl should only do what I call transfers, like uploads or downloads, not anything else. So this should be a URL, it should be uploads and or downloads. We're not entirely true there either, but that's what I try to sort of focus on. That's what curl should do. If it's not that, then it's probably not for curl.
I understand. So I understood as well why you built it initially. Well, you forked it from HTTP GET, well, more like you patched it, and then it had HTTP support, obviously, because that's how it started. But then you mentioned you also added Gopher support and FTP support, and it wasn't entirely clear to me why you did that. Was it just curiosity?
Yeah, no, because I wanted more currencies for my currency translation service, and I found other sites on those with hosting data over those protocols. So I added that to the tool to get more protocols more currencies for my currency translation thing in my bot. So I was still sort of working on that bot, and I just wanted to improve my currency translation. I mean, probably just completely pointless, because I got a lot of currencies, but currencies no one actually cared about. But it was more of a sure, why not? I can do this. How hard can it be? I want to have more currencies. And of course, then over time, I kind of grew bored with this currency part of that, and I stopped doing that. But the tool stuck, and by that time I also got more contributors, right? And I had a few users, people appreciate it, so we fixed bugs, we added features, and hosted it online, and it took off from there. In 2000, which is then about 2 years after I renamed it to curl, I also rewrote the internals a little bit, or sort of massaged the internals a little bit, to create the libcurl library, so that you could then build curl as both the library and as well as the command line tool. And that also made a difference, because as a library, it's easy for others to use curl as a component into other products, right? So that also helped deployment usage more, because other tools and devices and products also, of course, wanted that internet ability into their things. So projects and people quite soon adopted libcurl into their projects to use for doing internet transfers, which then helped curl getting more widespread. PHP, for example, was one of the first early adopters. So they pretty much immediately, once I had done libcurl, they adopted that into and made it the default HTTP URL transfer thing in PHP. And PHP, it has really taken over the internet, and the web is used literally everywhere. So it's by extension, then they took curl with them, and it made curl also pretty widely used just because of that.
And they still use it as the default backend for the client?
Yes.
Okay, and so you seem me like the kind of person which likes to dog feed on its own products and scratch their own itch, as you already mentioned, but you also do plenty of web server stuff, so I wonder how come you never expanded your scope to also include like server capabilities?
I think because it's a completely different set of challenges. So I think originally we were open to the idea of making it maybe something for the server side as well, but it's different. So doing servers then is so much different than doing clients. So I think we're actually early enough we never got enough interest and traction in doing server side stuff, and I think it was a good move. So looking back, I think that was a wise decision to avoid supporting the server side, because it's so much different, and scaling and doing web servers and all these other protocol servers is a completely different thing than doing it client. So I think we kept things simple and easy, the API easy and straightforward by not doing the server side. So we're strictly client side.
Yeah. And I do think you're right in that, because once you go into clients and servers, I mean, the combination is quite crazy sometimes. Now, I do wonder, talking about crazy, is if we go back to the starting point and we go all the way to now, where you went from HTTP, go over FTP, do you know by now how many protocols in total you support?
Yes, we say that it's 28. Different URL. It also depends on what you mean with a protocol, but URL schemes we support at least 28. So HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, FTPS, SFTP, SCP, IMAP, SMTP, POP3. There's a wide range of protocols. So yes, quite a lot of them. I think the most recent ones are the WebSocket ones, WS and WSS : //.
Yeah, and that's still HTTP based, but then
they start off over HTTP,
yes.
But they upgrade into WebSocket.
Yeah, correct. But then recently you also have like quick support, even though for that you started using other kind of backends, right?
Well, yeah. So quick support, yes, we have that because we want to support HTTP 3. So we don't actually particularly highlight quick, because quick is a mandatory thing to support HTTP 3, and we support HTTPS : //. And what HTTPS : what does it mean? We have a way to then ask for different versions or negotiate which version we speak over the wire. So we speak basically all versions of HTTP that ever has been used. 0.9, the first one that was actually made before the first RFC was made, and then was 1.0, 1.1, HTTP 2, and HTTP 3, and we support all of them. And HTTP 3, of course, is done over quick, which is done over UDP instead of TLS and TCP.
Yes, but then, for example, based on quick, you also nowadays have things like web transport. Is that something you'll support already or plan to support? Or
that is sometimes brought up as an idea. I have my doubts about web transport as supported in curl, so I don't think so. I wouldn't say never really, but I don't think we're going to support web transport, no.
Okay, I mean, I understand why, because it seems out of scope, but I ask because you also mentioned that you support WebSocket, which also seems a bit out of scope for curl.
I agree, but WebSocket is also often used just for transfers, and yeah, so I agree. WebSocket is a little bit in the gray zone. Is it really a protocol for curl? Yeah, but now we have it.
Is it then only in libcurl or also in the CLI? Because if it is in the CLI, then I wonder how do you use it?
Well, you use it pretty much like you would use Telnet. It's basically a session, and it is mostly so it basically just echoes what you get. And because in a lot of cases, people actually use WebSocket just to stream data. So you can just ask for a WebSocket stream and you can output it somewhere. And it's actually sometimes kind of useful to do that as a command line tool.
Yes, yes. Even though I always imagine it mostly useful for breaking out of the limitations of a browser. But once you go out of a browser, I would think there are better options than WebSockets, or am I wrong?
I think you're right, but I think there's also a lot of existing infrastructure already using WebSockets, and then you're sort of limited to, sure, this is how the other end works, right? So, and if the other end works with WebSockets, then you need to play with WebSockets. So I think that's the reason why curl supports it, because yes, if you end up in a situation where the other end actually says, sure, this is WebSockets, then we can speak it. And as you say, it's probably more of a libcurl thing, because you probably want more interaction back and forth, and you probably, in most cases, you have a particular, since WebSockets is more like sockets, so it could be pretty much anything. So you probably have when you do speak WebSockets, you know something about the other end. You want to do some particular communication with a particular implementation in the other end. So you probably write something special in your app against something special.
Okay. And then I wonder, as far as I know, you are the only full-time employee on curl. I mean, not sure if you can call it employee, but the full-time developer since all these years. And so I wonder how do you get your head straight across all these different protocols and all these, with what is it, like 200,000 lines of C code? I mean, it must be something like that.
Yes, it's about 180,000 lines of code. Well, how I do it. Yeah, so I've been doing this for a long time. All the protocols have been added gradually over time. I like network protocols. I think it's fun. I enjoy. So yeah, I read the specs. I talk to people. I try things out. So I don't know. How do you learn things? I just go about and try it and work on it and write a lot of tests and fail a lot of times and correct the things over time. That there's really no silver bullet or magic trick to use other than just set your mind to do it and do it. And of course, just accept that of course I forget a lot of things, so I often have to go back and read the specs again or just read the code again because I've forgotten about the details that I wrote only last year. I don't remember, but I can always go back and refresh my mind and read the specs again. Oh right, this is how it looked like.
Okay. And so as curl evolved and as you grew as a person, as a professional, in the meanwhile also C evolved, not as fast as some other languages, but it did change a lot since you used it for the first time. Do you, as a curl maintainer, also keep up to date with the latest C developments and try to use them, or do you stick with one of the original versions?
Yeah, so I'm more of, I don't follow the development and I don't follow along much. I'm really stuck in the old style of C. So we're using the C89, sometimes called C90 version, which is really a really legacy version, and for reasons, right? Because for a long time it wasn't really possible to use anything more modern. And possibly we can do it nowadays, but nowadays we're sort of a little bit stuck in old habits, and we've felt like, we don't feel any strong reasons to bump the requirements. So by sticking to this old legacy version of C, we also maintain this ease with how you can port it to all these different operating systems. I mean, I collect a list of all the operating systems curl has ever run on, and it's over 100 different operating systems. And that's amazing in itself. But one of the reasons we can do that is because we stick to this old C version. So compilers are easy to get to there. And compilers typically start out as C89 support and then possibly add more over time. But for some platforms, it has been a real benefit to just stick to the old version.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to also ask, and without any malintent, because I do like C myself, but the landscape of programming languages changed a lot today. And so I wonder,
Yes.
let's say the programming landscape of today would be the one in the 90s. I mean, it's a bit weird to imagine, but let's say the language of today would be then available. Would you still have picked C, or would you have chosen something different?
I actually, yeah. So since curl as a command line tool is separate from, if I sort of separate them from the libcurl, the library. So doing a library in a system level in an operating system, even today, is actually quite hard to not use C. I mean, or put the other way around, there are actually many benefits of writing them in C, because of limitation and of a little bit how the different languages today are made. I mean, I do shared libraries, and I think shared libraries is a necessity for operating system level libraries. And you don't do that with Rust. You don't do that with Go. You don't do that with a lot of other modern things. So while C is not actually the only option available, it's really the most mature and the most solid solution to do those things. Sure, there are downsides too with C, right? It's not memory safe, and some things are a little bit awkward to do or uncomfortable to write code. But that's also one of those things. I'm so accustomed, I'm so, used to doing it these ways. So it's also one of the things, I'm certainly most productive in C. So changing language would be a huge undertaking. So huge, I won't change language. So, but I also tend to sort of emphasize that I don't rewrite curl in another language, but I don't rewrite it in C either. I don't rewrite curl at all. I keep polishing. That's what I do. I keep tweaking things. We keep adding tiny things. We don't rewrite it, because that's the way I think we keep it solid and safe and secure, that we don't rewrite it, even though there might be fun new languages coming.
I understand, and it's pretty amazing to see your continuous development on curl, and I've been following your blog since a long time and following along your progress, and even today you still have these kind of patches and updates of things which seem like minor, and you would think maybe it was solved long ago, but you still manage to find new improvements, which is pretty amazing. But something I do get lost in is, after all these years, I really don't know all the command line arguments and the flags, and I wonder if you do.
I think that very few people actually know most of them. Yeah, so I think I know. Well, I would say it like this: I would have a hard time to list them all out of my head, because. So we're doing a release tomorrow, and we have 272 command line options, and of course it's impossible to remember all of them. And I can't. But if given a command line option, if you say, "Hey, what does this option do?" I think I actually know what most of them do, if not all. So yeah, since I haven't implemented all of them myself, but I have certainly been involved in pretty much all of them. So yes. And it is fascinating in the regard, as you mentioned, that we keep fixing things that you would imagine have been fixed already, because we've been doing this for closing into 30 years, but we still have bugs, and we still add things, right? We still change things, so we still introduce new bugs, and the world is changing, so servers are changing, and users are finding new ways to use things, and so yes, it's just this continuous journey of things changing everywhere and moving. So all those moving pieces, yeah, they seem to be, that seems to then just make it that we will never be done. We will always keep finding things to change, improve, fix, and tweak. So yeah.
I mean,
And then
it's nice, right? Because you enjoy the work. And so, like 3 years ago, I started my own network framework and I like it a lot and I like working on it. And yes, I did make the choice to do, like I aim for proxy, so I do both clients and service, which makes it like the scope maybe like a bit big. And for me alone to do it, I also have 3 small kids. And sometimes you are lucky that you find companies that want to use it and want to hire you for a short time to add some feature or make a custom integration with it. But these streams don't seem to last long. And so I find it quite challenging to combine it with my family life, with getting income and doing the work I love, because I mean, you're doing it close to 30 years. I wouldn't mind working on this also for 30 years. Like it's very pleasurable, and each year you do it, it improves. You see it growing, and these kind of improvements accumulate. You can like each year you work on it, like it's very fun to work on, and you can reap the benefits. But like, how was it for you to combine this? Because I also know you have kids. You also had to have income because in the end you have to eat, but you also like to work on it. So throughout these years, how did you manage to do that?
well, through all, I mean, the first few decades, it was just my spare time project. So then, sure, I had a full-time job. I did my curl stuff on my spare time. So late evenings, weekends, whatever I got some time off, I worked on curl. And then I had my full-time job. And as you said, I have 2 kids. They're not small anymore, so I don't have to take care of them much now. But still, sure, a life and life happens, and you have a lot of commitments to do, and take care of the house, move the lawn, laundry, whatever. So yes, it's been challenging at times, and I've lost a lot of sleep many late nights when I've worked on curl instead of sleeping. So uh, again, that's hard. But one thing I've sort of tried to just lean back on is that time is also one of these things that you can just, if you if you really make an effort, you can, and you make. I've always one of the skills I have used, I think, is that I'm pretty good at starting where I left the last time, and I'm pretty good at taking advantage of the time I have. So if I had 15 minutes in the evening, I could use those 15 minutes, and then I get another hour tomorrow and 2 hours the day after that, and if you're able to actually use that time, the time adds up, and then it'll become something over time because it adds up. Um, and that's of course a difficult thing and a challenge. And as I sometimes say, it's also a luxury because in a life there are a lot of things that need to work. And of course, having a family, it sometimes meant that sure, my wife took care of the kids while I sat and poked at curl instead. And of course, that has to work, right? It's a luxury for me to have that set up. But sure, just me wanting to do it, having a lot of fun, and spending a lot of time at it. And then over time, it started to become something. And of course, made it open source. So I got a lot of people helping out, sending bug reports and offering patches to do things. So I was never completely alone. There was always a community out there working with me on these things.
Yeah, I understand. And like I'm also doing it open source because I've always done open source, and this is my first big project. I tried to do my own. In the past I was usually jumping on an existing project and helping them out and learning a lot from that. But so I get it, and I get what you're trying to say, but and maybe it's just me, but so let's say, okay, I did my work in the day. I also spent some time with my kids, and now I find 50 minutes to do it, which does happen. But then those 50 minutes often turn out in 1 hour or 2 hours because I kind of like lose sense of time, and then you lose sleep, which is not very sustainable. And next to that, I'm doing my day job, and while I like to work on many things, like I wonder and often think about the other project, and maybe I even like sometimes do some quick work of my project in what I should do, like work time, and you kind of like lose motivation. I wonder like, okay, I don't know, I find it very hard to combine and just think like, okay, I just keep 30 minutes to that, or 1 hour to that, because you think if I just give it 2 hours here, then I make even more progress, and it's maybe even also feels more satisfying or fulfilling, or I don't know. Like it's quite respectable that you've been able to compartmentalize this as well as you did for so long.
But of course, it's hard sometimes. And sometimes, as you say, you get just sucked into something and then you spend far too much time on it. And sure, sometimes it would become it was a challenge, sort of. Sure, I have my full-time job and I have my curl stuff and I want stuff done in both, right? And there's a life. So how do you actually get time to do all of that and keep everything working? And sometimes, of course, one piece in that would break somehow, or you would sort of not give it enough attention. Uh, and yeah, it was hard at times, but yeah, it worked out in the long term.
And is it
Long term.
because the world was different? Like, did you never think much earlier? Okay, maybe I can find a company that's willing to that is building on curl, and maybe they won't sponsor me, but maybe they hire me to work full time on it, which is something that happens nowadays sometimes in open source.
Well, I never had any such offers, so that was never an option for me. So I I think I pretty early sort of wanted to work more with something like curl, but I never had any real opportunity to do that. So I worked in embedded systems primarily. I did contracting as a sort of a consultant within different embedded, mostly different devices and things here in Sweden for many years. And then while I have at some point when I sort of finished up a contract and I started to look for another sort of mission to do, what should I do next? I was contacted by a friend who worked at Mozilla at the time, and he asked me if I was interested to maybe work on Firefox next. And that was the first, and that was late 2013, and that was the first time I actually got an offer to do something that was, related to protocols, client networking, and all of that. So of course that was a little bit of a dream come true already then, because sure I wanted to work on HTTP full time, because it sort of a little bit would combine my worlds a little bit. So my spare time project curl and doing HTTP at work hours, that would be great. So that's, of course, it was a perfect match for me. So I ended up working for Mozilla with Firefox for 5 years then.
But that was still work that's not on curl. It's work
exactly
you like.
Right. It was still just similar technology, not curl. Yeah. But I also got some allowed. I was allowed to spend some work hours on curl then, whilst I was employed by Mozilla. So then I could actually do a little bit more curl than just spare time. So spare time and a little bit of work time.
Okay, well that does help a lot. At least then you might hopefully get some more sleep. But of course, by then your kids were also starting to, I imagine, close to university, or if not already, or.
Yeah, they are. No, they are by now. Yeah.
But by the time you were at Mozilla.
They were not that big.
No. Okay. So, and then, but by now, like finally, I think now you're at a point where you can work full time on curl and have your open source donations to pay for you and maybe even some other contributors, right?
Yeah, actually, what pays most of my bill are big companies that pay me for support of different kinds. So yeah, I offer curl support for commercial companies. So, which mostly means that I guarantee response time and help them out with their problems swiftly. So
Does
companies
it eat
that
a lot of your time? Like, because I mean that often, like, support might mean that you need to troubleshoot with them, or being in meetings with them, or diagnose
yes,
issues.
it depends on, it goes up and down. A little bit depends on their problems. Usually it's more like an insurance for them that if something goes really bad, they know how to contact, and I have a guarantee to help them with their problems ASAP, sort of, because they are companies for which they sort of the curl component is crucial or extremely important to their business, product, service, whatever. So they understand and appreciate the sort of getting things fixed in case they run into problems. But usually they don't run into problems, and so they usually don't need to engage with me on a day-to-day basis. So in a normal day, I don't interact with any of them in any particular degree, but sure, sometimes I need to do a lot of that. So it really depends on what happens.
Yeah, and so yeah, usually I'm pretty positive, but then sometimes I get into despair, and something like curl is quite huge. I mean, among the open source projects is probably something that most projects will never reach, to the use of, like, to the extent of how much it's used and how big it is and how established it is. But then if I see how much donations you get, it still seems pretty minuscule to all the revenue that you probably generate among these companies. And recently you also gave like a talk where you like mentioned, okay, all these car companies use my projects, but then none of them like contribute anything or even pay. And I would think if all of them just pay a little bit, your revenue would probably like skyrocket. And so, yeah, how do
Yeah,
you feel about that? I mean,
yeah, that's sort of my dream outcome. But yeah, so you're right, and I often say that, and I feel that sometimes I have these weird incentives in the project that the better product we make, the less people contribute, because the better it just works, so no one feels the need to actually help out, because, well, everything just works, we don't need to pay. So it's most of my customers, they were paying customers that pay for support, they become customers because they run into a problem or they want a feature, either or. But that gives me this weird incentive that it's good for me to not ship a perfect product. I need to have some sand in the machine, right? So every once in a while I need companies to run into problems so that they come and understand that they need to pay someone for support, which is weird. Um, but yes, otherwise, I of course would like more companies to realize that it's in their interest to make sure that we survive and that we can ship a product even next year and the next year and the next year if they rely on it as a component in their products, right? I mean, in many cases, these companies, I mean, those 47 car companies, they were just fun example because they're known brands and they were so clearly visible, and I could do this visible slide. But and in some cases they might not even use curl a lot, right? So maybe it's not even worth it for them to pay anyone for curl because it's just a silly thing they just use once per month. But some of them use curl all the time, and to them maybe it would be a big blow to their business if curl wouldn't exist next year. So for them it would be a business interest to at least make sure that we survive and that we manage to keep doing things correctly and safely and securely and blah blah blah. So, but it seems that that's not the world. That's not the way the world works, right? It's very market economy. They don't have to pay, so they don't pay. We give it away for free. The license says they can do this. It's totally legal and fine, so they do that. They don't have to pay, so they mostly seem to think that someone else will pay. And and sometimes someone else pays, and sometimes someone else doesn't pay.
yeah, I mean, it just makes me wonder what all the much smaller projects in the world have any kind of hope of ever getting like sustainable and being able to work on it full time.
Yes, yeah, I agree. But then also we're all in different boats there. So, for example, again, then if you have more problems, if your project is harder to use but fill a need, then maybe that's actually a better position to to be, because then you might actually have a better position to sell your services around it. And looking at other similar or projects in sort of in my position, there seems to be a lot of different solutions and a lot of different situations where people are financially. So some projects seem to manage really well depending on factors in their area, right? So I don't think you can't really judge the situation for the entire open source ecosystem just based on my situation, because there are a lot of different situations.
I understand. And so we talked a bit of, okay, you can get sponsorship, you can get hired by a company to work on it, but maybe another option would have been that you try to build yourself something commercially around curl. So you have curl, but then maybe you build some kind of commercial product or service which heavily relies on having this as your core component. Is that something you ever tried or thought about?
We have thought about it, we have discussed it. So we have not done it, but we have not ruled it out either. So maybe at some point, but the difficult thing, well, first you have to figure out what that extra commercial thing should be. What kind of product would that be that would also be attractive and get customers? But then you also need to spend a lot of time on that, and you have to develop that and sell that and market that. And so it's a challenge in itself, right? Because then back again to what do you spend your time on? Right now I spend an enormous amount of time on curl. So if I would say, sure, I want to do a commercial other product using curl and spend, I don't know how much time on that, I don't know, I would have a challenge to spend a lot of time on something else than curl.
Yeah, I understand, right, but I'm thinking more like, okay, now you're in this position where you can do this, but let's say we are going back to maybe 2007, 2006, where you were in a very different position. You were spending anyway your daytime on a day job. I would think maybe it's possible that, and so I wasn't meaning some kind of commercial version of curl, but more something where you yourself have also a company that heavily relies on curl, right?
Yeah, but that's what I mean. But that still needs a lot of development and a good idea and a good product.
Yeah, correct. But yeah, maybe I'm a bit dreamy, but I would hope you might be able to find something like that, and where if you accept the fact that you have 8 hours of day job time or something, that instead of working for that company, you would work for your own company, working on this product, and given that you would be maybe as a single developer, also the amount of revenue you have to make would be like less. I would think something like that is possible, especially given how early days you were in the web.
Yeah, but again, maybe I could have, but that's a sort of a totally sort of hypothetical scenario. I did not have any such ideas, so I didn't do that because I had nothing to do other than curl. And for curl, I never wanted it to be anything else than open source. I never considered anything else than open source, and I don't think it had been this success unless it had been open source either. So, and I actually, when I talk about open source and I talk about curl and all these 47 companies not paying anything for curl, then so many people are just saying, so why don't you just relicense curl under another license that makes them, I don't know, less likely to be able to do it like this? But then it just goes back to sort of a circle here, that they wouldn't use curl if it wasn't this sort of liberally licensed and open for them to use. Because if I would say, hey, tomorrow it's GPL, they wouldn't use it. They would just use the previous version that's not GPL, and they would fork it and go somewhere else, because that's how they work, right? So it's a little bit like that too. So it's not that easy to just get someone to pay for it either. And just changing the license, even though people keep saying that I could do that just to get them to pay, it's not that easy either.
No, correct. And for example, I also have a very permissive license, and I think it's the right thing to do. Over time, also plenty of people contribute, and I would feel it's kind of like a betrayal to them as well. And as you say, a project usually will not have that much success anyway, or chance of surviving if it isn't as permissive as that, because that's just the way it works. So it's a pretty challenging equation. But yeah, you managed to pull it off, so that's very cool for you. Now, as the project has been going for so long, as you said, close to 3 decades, I wonder, are you ever thinking about some kind of succession plan, or how this will like live beyond you?
Yes, to the extent that I'm making sure that everything is laid out to successfully work, even if I'm not around. We don't have anyone. There's no appointed heir. There's no prince to take over after me, right? But so we actually work really hard at making sure that everything is documented, expressed, and planned so that and that's not only to just make sure that things work without me. It's just to make sure things are documented and properly structured, and everything is known and in the clear. Everyone can figure out exactly how curl the project works, how we do releases, how we do blah blah. Everything in curl is completely documented. So if I go away tomorrow, everything should be known and established, and we already know exactly how everything. So anyone, in theory, then anyone can take over the project starting whenever. And really, we're a whole bunch of maintainers in the curl project that have been around the project for many years. So there are certainly a whole bunch of people that are very knowledgeable about curl in general, the way we do things, protocols, and the test suites, and all of that. So I'm not worried, and I don't have any plans to ever just drop everything accidentally one day and just vanish. So I imagine that over time it'll just be more other people getting involved, and maybe over time less me, and then at some point just less and less me, and then at some point it doesn't really matter if I'm there or not.
I understand. Yeah. Now, it's one thing to develop this software and run it on your machine and you can test it, but sometimes you run into these kind of weird like issues on that only affects a specific CPU architecture or like OS platform. And while there are probably like these days cloud versions where you can have your CI running on all these different architecture and platforms, it's a pretty slow feedback loop as well. So I wonder, how do you tackle those kind of issues if they occur, like maybe very rare issues where it only happens sometimes on the specific client or whatever?
Yeah, we have all of that. I mean, in first we have those 100 something operating systems. We have 28 different CPU architectures that you can run curl on, and then in addition to that, you can build curl on and off with you can toggle features on and off, and you can select different backends to do TLS or SSH and IDN and stuff like that. So there are literally billions of build combinations. So it's quite impossible to test everything, and it's actually impossible for us to even reproduce a lot of problematic cases that people report. So we just have to do whatever is sensible as an engineering thing, right? So write as many tests as we can, run tests on a wide number of different platforms to try to cover up, try to build and test all the sort of the popular common build combinations, the feature sets that we can, but it still leaves out a lot of combinations and architectures and everything that we never test on when we can't do that. And then we just have to make sure that we write the code as sensible as possible to make sure that that possibly works. And then we rely on users, of course, to test that and report whatever doesn't work, or even fix what doesn't work, because we don't have access to those fringe operating systems maybe. So there's really no secret to that either. It's just a lot of best practices. Just keep the engineering, write good code, clear, documented, and try to not touch code that you can't verify. But it's hard. It's of course really hard. And since then we make a library that is used as a component within a lot of other things, it often ends up like where user runs a user runs curl in some kind of product. Hey, we did 200,000 transfers, and then suddenly we got an error. Why? And of course, it's impossible for us to tell that, right? Because it could be any one of a bazillion different reasons. But I mean, users still do that, and they still have the problem, and they will still report it. So then we have to start the discussion, right? What can we remove from this equation? How can we reproduce it without involving maybe 200K transfers first? Maybe we can do 20. Does it still reproduce? Does it reproduce against all servers? Does it reproduce if you build it on a different platform? Does it reproduce if you change blah, blah, blah? And, just the regular old engineering debugging things.
Okay, but if I understand correctly, when this happens, you do also rely on them to get as close as possible to where the problem lies, and maybe even then fixing it, because you yourself might not have access to the exact conditions to be able to reproduce it.
Right. And when it comes to them reporting bugs into an open source project, I actually view it more like me helping them to fix the problem rather than me fixing the problem for them. Because in many cases, it's really not possible for me to debug it even, because sure, I can help them sort of guide the debugging and offer advice on what maybe look at next and so on. But in many cases, I really can't. In many cases, I can't debug it. In some cases, of course, that sounds wrong, right? It shouldn't do that. And then I can take a look at the code and maybe see, well, maybe in this case, maybe we misbehave or something. So it depends on the cases. But when it comes to submitting a bug to an open source project, it really has to be the submitter's job to drive it forward. And I offer advice and insights, and otherwise, it doesn't really work. It's a different thing if someone pays me to help them with the debugging, right? Then I go further an extra mile because then someone actually relies on me and pays me to fix the issue for them. But even paying customers, the challenge can be the same, right? Because they run it in some particular platform in some surrounding that might be really hard for me to reproduce, even if they are paying.
Yeah, correct. And so I wonder, if you look back at those 30 years, do you feel like it was all worth it? Like, would you have done it all over again?
Yes, I think so, because I think in many ways I'm living the dream here. I'm working with my hobby full time, and I get to do it all days, every day, as much as I want. So I think I'm in a very luxury position. So yes, I think I would do it all again. I mean, sure, there might be some details along the road that could have been done differently, but I think those are just details. I think we've managed pretty good in the great scheme of things.
And how did your life partner look at all this through these years? I mean, I'm sure she supported you, but how does she view the project?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think she just views it like that, sort of, that's my lifelong mission to work on, and I never get bored, and I seem to never stop talking about it either. And years ago she occasionally asked me if it was ever done, but she stopped doing that, and I think she's just realized that this is what I'm going to do. And for her, I think it's more of a, we all work on something, right? We all have jobs, and now it's my job too. So maybe it's easier to view as what I do now. I work on this. This is my job, even if I view it as something slightly more than just a job, right? Because even if I wouldn't get paid, I could still probably couldn't drop it, because this is now my life, and my life is this kind of. So yeah, I'm enjoying it still. And yeah, after soon 30 years, it's still fun.
Very good. I hope that keeps like that. Maybe it could be like really a lifelong thing, if that's what you want. We've talked a long time already, and so I don't want to take too much of your time anymore, but I wonder if there's anything more you would like to discuss or plug into our podcast.
I think we've covered a lot of things, so not that I can think of, no.
Okay, in that case, I thank you very much for your time. I will also include your information and links in the show notes so people can find you. Well, I imagine they will anyway find you. You are not hard to find. But
I hope not.
Yeah. Would be a bit funny for someone doing networking that you would be hard to find. But anyway, I do thank you and I wish you all the best, and I hope you can keep finding enjoyment in the beautiful craft work that you are doing.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
NetStack.fm is brought to you by Plavayo, building secure, open, and resilient infrastructure with Rust, protocols, and purpose. This show is also made possible by Rama, the open source networking framework. Plavayo offers service contracts and welcome sponsorships to keep building and supporting its ecosystem. The theme music of this podcast was composed by DJ Mailbox. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave a 5-star review. It really helps others discover the show. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time for the next handshake.